it's a sign of fun and energy and drive. You know, you're driving forward, and that's great. I'm not sure Keir Starmer was driving forward with
Well,
his speech
well, I
that
listened to
went on for an
George.
hour and a
Well,
half
it's
today at
interesting. We had
lunchtime.
George Folks come on, and he said, "No, listen, Keir Starmer has made a massive, massive difference today. He's rammed, Boris Johnson's sort of personality and being a showman down his throat. He's managed to, marginalise the hard left. And today was the day that Starmer showed that the Labour Party can be electable." Richard, I don't want to give the wrong impression, and I was saying this earlier. He just doesn't inspire me in terms of his language, his body language. Just, I don't know what it is. Maybe it is like a lawyer, I don't know. But I don't feel galvanised when he speaks. Do you know what I mean?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Jeremy. He's rather lawyerly.
Yeah.
But there was, credit where credit's due. There were certain things you could really see in his speech, inspiring or not. So, as I understand, it was actually written by one of Tony Blair's best speechwriters.
Oh, right.
And you could see it, you could see it in the language. The number of times he used the word that we all love, British. When did you ever hear Corbyn or anyone else in the Labour Party use the word British?
No.
He used the word patriotism quite a lot. So you could see the sort of direction of travel he was trying to go to. He had a couple of quite funny gags against Boris Johnson, frankly, quite rightly. I mean, we all know Boris is a sort of blustering salesman and showman.
He might be, but he's got an 80-seat majority, hasn't he?
He has indeed. But I think that the real thing that troubled me about there were many things that troubled me. But, he didn't tell us how we're actually going to pay for anything. He didn't talk about economic growth. He didn't talk about how the lowest paid were going to earn more. He didn't talk about how small businesses are going to be able to drive forward the economy. And there's only one way we can sensibly get this nation out of this crisis we're in, Jeremy, and that's by growing our way out of it.
And that's the point, isn't it? I think it's very easy. I mean, I've been saying for days, Richard, that any country needs an effective and strong opposition. That goes without saying. And to me and to millions of other people, I hope, the truth is, yes, Boris Johnson is a bluffer. Yes, he doesn't seem to be great on detail. Yes, he's got this majority, but we still need a strong opposition to hold him to account and question what he's doing for the next 5 years. The Labour Party is there's so many different factions. You'd look at it this week and you go, do you know what? They planned this for months. I don't think it's going to go away. I'm sure he's got a very, very difficult job to do. I gave an analogy earlier I'd love to share with you. If I went to a company and Keir Starmer was the CEO, I'd think, yeah, I can see that. If I went to a company and I'd been there a year and then they asked me to vote either for Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer, I'd probably vote for Boris Johnson because I'd think that would be a little bit dynamic and he might do something for me. He might not last 10 years. I'm not sure how the Labour Party, under anybody, can get past that for a good number of years. Do you?
You're probably right. In fairness, though, actually, I think, yes, there were a few hecklers, but actually there was a real concerted effort in the hall, credit where credit's due, for people to get behind him. And, that was quite sensible sort of management. But look, the bottom line is he is a reactive lawyer. He could argue the case for both sides very competently, and that's fine. But it's not inspirational. It's neither chief exec style. It's not chairman style. It's just a bit bland. And therefore, you have got a situation where Boris, despite all his multiple failures, his multiple incompetencies, the Labour Party, because they're not on the front foot, in the same way that Boris is not on the front foot, Boris somehow gets away with it.
I think for me, to sum it up and we'll move on, is that Keir Starmer would be sort of, running the organisation because he'd been there 20 years and he'd been the third assistant, the second assistant, and then the chairman had left. If it was me looking at it, he wouldn't get the job on dynamic, charisma, detail. Just doesn't do it for me, I suppose, is me being completely honest. That doesn't mean that I don't see faults in Boris Johnson. Talking of which, this petrol crisis, I'd love your take on this, Rich. I mean, we've had people say it's not happening. We've had people saying it's been stoked up by the media. I was talking about how I went out the other morning because my daughter passed a test. I did the 6 a.m. to try and get her 30 quid's worth, and I spoke to a guy. He'd been there 18 hours. He was being abused and jostled. The other side of the argument is surely Johnson saw this coming. That's maybe an example of the weakness of him. What's the truth? Are we going to be okay, or is this a major, major issue in your opinion?
Look, I mean, of course, we will be okay. But this started, Jeremy, because, when parts of the media, one newspaper in particular, came up with a a dramatic headline, because people don't trust a single word that cabinet ministers or the prime minister says anymore, because they've so many times they've said one thing and then done another, that actually, and no one came out. Where was Boris on Friday after that ridiculous Daily Mail headline? Where was he front foot saying, it's a ridiculous headline, there's plenty of fuel, there's no shortage, I'm the prime minister, ignore what they say. And, in the event that there's any issue, we've got the army on standby.
Well, you'll love this. This is, Richard, this is just in from the business secretary on Twitter. I can confirm the government's reserve tanker fleet will be on the road this afternoon to boost deliveries of fuel to the forecourts across Britain. The trucks are driven by civilians, so not the army then, and will provide additional logistical capacity to the fuel industry. We are now seeing signs that the situation at the pumps has begun to improve. Yep. With more stations getting fuel, the sooner we can return to normal buying habits, the sooner the situation will return to normal. That just in from the business secretary. Your response to that, Richard?
Brilliant, but it's 5 days too late.
Yeah.
B, it's 2 days after George Eustice went around the media round and said that there was no need for bringing the army and that there wasn't on their agenda. You can't trust a single word these people say. They're constantly reactive. And it's just not good. It's just not good enough, Jeremy.
Why? See, this is what I don't get as well. This is what I mean, look, the Labour Party or the left or the Liberal Democrats that work on this show through the glass, they'd all have you say that Johnson won because he came up, get Brexit done. That was it. And people forgot how shallow and lacking in detail he actually is. Has Boris Johnson been found out, or are we facing just this mammoth amount of, things that have just been they've just been one after the other. It's an avalanche of misery, isn't it? Has Johnson been found out, or is it just the way the world's going? Could anybody else have done a better job? That's the next question, I guess, Richard.
Yes, of course they could have done, because he has been found out as a blustering, blundering salesman. Look, we all love a good salesman.
Yeah.
But, there's no detail behind. There's no hard work behind. There's no courage behind. He's not a brave man. He's not what he'd like to be, a Churchillian figure. The truth is he's a bit cowardly. He's afraid of rolling his sleeves up from proper hard work. And yes, he's been found out. Yes, it was a hideous crisis. Yes, we would have all made mistakes. But, have the courage to admit your mistakes, to learn from them, and to make, prompt, fast decisions thereafter. We've literally been on the back foot month after month after month. And most
but
of
why
that is
doesn't
all
he get on the front
leadership.
foot? He's got this huge majority. He's got people telling him. Why is he, in your mind, you're a politician, why is he not braver? What's wrong with him? Why isn't he braver? Is it better to say nothing because you fear that you'll mess it up? What's the theory behind that?
Jeremy, you can't train or learn bravery and courage. It's either in you or it's not. And it's not in the Prime Minister.
What's he scared of?
Full stop.
What's he scared of?
He's scared of lots of things, including a comb, it would seem. But he's just not got the courage actually to make some tough decisions and to lead promptly from the front and to get ahead of things. He's always reacting. He's always listening to what his advisors might say, thinking about what the headlines might be, as opposed to having some proper
but you bring up
but
you bring up advisors. But you bring up advisors. I would be saying to him, Boris, listen, every time you're too scared to say how you feel, right? Something happens and then you have to jump in and do a U-turn or say, I should have done that before. Why aren't his advisors saying to him, Richard, you know what? Put your neck on the line here. And if it goes wrong, go on television, put your hands up in the air and say, this is unprecedented, da-da-da-da. Perhaps we should have done this. Don't get honest politicians like that, do you? That shows weakness. But I think it shows that he's real. That a politician is like normal if he does that or she does that.
He's not a real leader. That's the point, Jeremy. We're at this moment of crisis. Why isn't he up there, front centre stage, actually talking about the crisis with the fuel and giving people some confidence and some leadership? Why is he relying on Kwasi Kwarteng? Why is he relying on George Eustice? Yeah. And others,
Kwasi Kwarteng just done that Twitter, and you're absolutely right. Does Johnson win the next election though because of the disarray, or does Starmer come up on the inside and blow us all away?
Well, obviously, I'm hoping that as many people as possible will vote Reform UK, and
but you're not going to win the election with the greatest respect, are you? I'm not being disrespectful. You're not going to win, are you?
I'm not going to answer that, Jeremy. But what I am going to say is that it's most unlikely. I think Labour are finished. I don't think they win a majority ever again in your and my lifetime.
Wow.
I think they go the way of the Liberals 100 years ago. The question the country has to ask itself is, how long does it want to live in a one-party state before it says, we need to look elsewhere, we need something different, this country deserves better?
Interesting. So you're the leader of the Reform Party. Maybe in hindsight, in terms of what you've said and what we've talked about, COVID, the pandemic, maybe Brexit has papered over the fact that this is not a particularly switched on Conservative government. They haven't got an awful lot of policy to bring in, and maybe it's what politics is, and you know this better than me. It's about timing, isn't it? Good politics. It is about timing. You can be, the wrong person at the right time. You can be the right person at the wrong time. There's plenty of talented politicians who haven't made it. Boris Johnson, but he was very strong on something that needed to be strong, and he followed a woman who was not the best. It'll be very interesting to see. Finally, before you go, Richard, and really interesting, I'm going to throw this one at you. No, there's been no warning of it, but obviously today sees that horrific sentencing for the really tragic murder of Sarah Everard. We had an ex-Met superintendent on, and we were talking about the safety of women on the streets. I'd be interested in your view. Do you think people's belief, confidence, and trust in the police has gone? Do you think it's on the wane, and how can they get it back?
Jeremy, I think it's on the wane. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. And sadly, tragically, it's not the only example. No. So I think it is on the wane. And I'm afraid I come back to this word leadership. I've been very critical of the leadership of the Met Police, not only Cressida Dick, but actually the level of people below her. I think they're just focused on the wrong issues. The bottom line is, in this case, Londoners, but actually people up and down the country, Jeremy, they want the police on the streets, visible, preventing crime and catching criminals. And when they catch them, they want to know they're going to be banged up and they're going to serve a proper sentence.
But then, as somebody said to me earlier, that's all well and good to label the police with that. But if you haven't been given the resources by central government, if there isn't on the statute book laws you can bring in, whether it's the people on the M25, then you're in a powerless position. It's easy to blame them, isn't it?
No, Jeremy. The truth is, the laws are there. The laws are there, for example, with these lunatics, these insulate Britain people. The laws are there. The highway laws are there. You've just got to have a police force that is willing to use them.
Why are they not then? Why are the police force not?
Because I'm afraid it's back to this word leadership. You've got to have courageous leadership to do the right thing, and they're there. And people want firm, robust, consistent policing that we can have confidence in. I'm afraid. Whether it's the government, whether it's the Prime Minister, whether it's the police, whether it's the civil service, we have a crisis of a lack of confident, bold, visionary.
Well, it's really interesting. I just had a text in. Answer this. This says, is personality really the top priority of being, say, Prime Minister? Was Thatcher the biggest personality? Was Cameron, but they still won? How do you answer that?
The reality is Thatcher was a bold, courageous, principled leader. It wasn't about her personality. It was about her principles, her strong values, and an absolute determination to lead from the front. And everybody knew where she stood on any particular issue, whether you liked it or not. She was a real leader.
If you disagreed, she sacked you. Brilliant.
Yeah, well, that's what leadership's about.
And then after 10 years, there's 400 of them all in the room going, we've all been sacked, let's get rid of her. But you're right. She got a lot more done by having a pair, didn't she, to be fair?
Correct. And the country moved forward. Of course, there were some difficulties, and of course, she didn't get everything right. But, she made some proper, brave, principled decisions based on strong leadership. And that's, we need that strength of leadership. We're a great nation, Jeremy. I say we're like a nation of lions and lionesses when we're literally led by donkeys at the moment.
I'm falling towards the Reform UK. I think I should speak to Richard off air.